promised you a racy story for this episode. In that regard, Robert Plampin is the gift that keeps on giving. We met him briefly in episode 5 as the son of John, the Plampin in the Gainsborough painting. One of Robert's sisters, Elizabeth, was being courted by Orwell Oakes, son of James Oakes, who, to our eternal gratitude, was a prolific diary writer since the age of 37. For nearly 50 years, James chronicled daily events in and around Bury St Edmunds, Suffolk. When read today, these diaries deliver a rich insight into the social and economic feel of Georgian times in England in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Our Robert turns up in these diaries, dining with the Oakes, attending balls at their premises at 81 Guildhall Street, Bury St Edmunds, and representing the Navy at special events organised by James Oakes. Robert Plampin is a very interesting character. He has an extensive listing on Wikipedia, which showcases his naval career in the English Navy. During Georgian times, 1714 to 1837, the English Navy, later known as the Royal Navy, was a dominant force and absolutely crucial for Britain's global power and trade. It was well known for its professional officer corps, often trained from boyhood just like Robert, and its reliance on both volunteer and conscripted sailors. The Navy played a vital role in protecting British colonies, trade routes, and in major conflicts like the Napoleonic Wars. Robert is listed as having fought in the American Revolutionary Wars, the French Revolutionary Wars, and the Napoleonic Wars. Robert made a point of becoming fluent in languages. In between wars, he travelled widely in Europe, specifically to gain fluency in French and Dutch. These skills were noted by his superiors and increasingly earned him roles as aides to very senior officers, as well as responsibilities in cross-cultural missions. His linguistic skills no doubt helped him advance through the naval ranks. During the Georgian period, the English Navy was divided into 3 fleets: red, white, and blue. Robert finished his career in the Navy as a Vice-Admiral of the Whites. This made him only second in seniority, just below the Admiral of the White Fleet. In an interesting aside, the then flag of the White Fleet, the White Ensign, is now the flag of the Royal Navy. This happened in 1864, when the red, white and blue fleet system was discontinued and the red and blue ensigns were discarded. Robert's write-up in Wikipedia and his participation in 3 significant naval wars could suggest much military prowess. Alas, Robert's postings were very much the holding of secured areas. In fact, when he eventually returned to England in 1820, after being away at sea for 45 years, he asked to be given the title of Knight Commander of the Order of Bath, but was informed by Lord Melville that such awards could only be made for service in the face of the enemy. Melville did, however, praise Robert's war record in his reply. Roberts is of special interest because he has a connection to Cape Town. In 1816, he was appointed Commander-in-Chief, Africa, overseeing the Cape of Good Hope Station, which we now know as Cape Town. From 1750 to 1779, the Cape of Good Hope was strategically important due to the increasing competition between France and Great Britain for control of the seas. But a year before Robert arrived in 1816, and for the next 33 years, the Cape of Good Hope base was mainly used for refitting and repair work on vessels. It also acted as a port of call for nautical surveyors who were mapping the region. Also, just before Robert arrived, the Navy moved to its base in Simonstown. As such, Robert Plampin operated out of Admiralty House, Simonstown, which you can see today. Part of Robert's Commander-in-Chief Africa responsibilities was St Helena in the South Atlantic. At this time, former Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte was imprisoned there by the British. Robert visited St Helena regularly and spoke with Napoleon. Again, we're fortunate to have a diary to provide some important information. Dr. John Stoker was on St Helena as doctor to the prisoner Napoleon, at the same time Robert was commander of the colony. Dr. Stoker writes of this time, "I thought that I should see the great man, and probably have the honour of conversing with him. Little did I think at the time that the honour would be so dearly purchased." Robert's first visit to St Helena set the tone for the rest of his time on the island. En route to St Helena, to relieve the previous commander, Robert had stopped off at the Isle of Wight and picked up a woman, a very unorthodox thing to do. This stop-off made his arrival in St Helena later than expected, much to the annoyance of Colonial Administrator Hudson Lowe and the man he was relieving, Sir Pulteney Malcolm. Robert's woman remained hidden on board, as Robert undertook the formalities of going to Plantation House to greet Mr. and Mrs. Lowe and Sir Malcolm. Later, he installed the mystery woman in the Briars, his assigned house on St Helena. Of course, word soon spread across the island that Robert had smuggled a woman onto the island. The upright was scandalized, as was the local vicar. While in command of St Helena Station, Plampin was especially singled out as the object of Reverend Mr. Boy's strictures from the pulpit. There was talk the mystery woman could be sent back to England, and that Robert would also be sent home in disgrace. This never happened. Robert's wife, was never received at Plantation House. Instead, the colonial administrator, who was known as the Hard Man, used this woman's presence to buy Robert's compliance in not affording Napoleon medical attention. As he reported back to London, Vice-Admiral Plampin seems to have decided to attempt no interference whatever. If he took any steps, it would be in order to assist me. This was catastrophic to Dr. Stokoe, who was pleading for prisoner Napoleon to be given better medical treatment as he was suffering from hepatitis. He wrote, "They will only believe he is ill when they find him dead on his bed." Dr. Stokoe had made some headway with the previous commander, Sir Malcolm, and had obviously hoped to get help from Robert. But Robert didn't want to rock the boat given his woman's situation. The Russian, Count Balmain, was on St Helena at this time. Under the 1815 Treaty of Paris, each Allied nation could have a representative observing the treatment of Napoleon. Count Balmain wrote this of Robert's attitude to Napoleon: "Admiral Plampin is a timid man, whose one wish is to live in peace and meddle with nothing. He has seen Bonaparte once and made no impression upon him." He wasn't wrong about Napoleon's thoughts on Robert. The ex-emperor said this: "He reminds me of those drunken little Dutch skippers that I've seen in Holland, sitting at a table with a pipe in his mouth, a cheese, and a bottle of Geneva before him." Dr. Stokoe's insistence on tendering to the ill Napoleon incurred the wrath of Administrator Lowe and Robert. Dr. Stokoe was finally court-martialed as he refused to stop advocating for medical care for Napoleon. Nobody would conduct his defense, and no witnesses would stand for him. He was dismissed from the Navy. Arnold Chaplin, in The Who's Who of St Helena, writes, "While in command of the St Helena Station, Plampin, throughout, was a firm supporter of the policy of Sir Hudson Lowe. He showed no sympathy with the lot of Bonaparte, and always spoke of him in the most disparaging terms. His attitude towards Mr. Stokoe, the surgeon of the Conqueror, who attended Napoleon in 1819, was unduly harsh, and it was largely owing to the Admiral's attitude at the court-martial that Stokoe was dismissed from the Navy." Plampin had 2 interviews with the Emperor on July 3rd and September 5th, 1817. The conversation turned upon the amount of water on board ship and the experiences of the Admiral when cruising off Toulon. The opinion of Napoleon concerning Plampin was no more favourable than the Admiral's concerning him. I felt so angry when I read of the actions of Robert in blocking medical care to Napoleon, simply to keep attention off his own activities. Only 50 years later, in 1864, the International Red Cross was formed at the Geneva Convention. The Red Cross laid out international humanitarian law, something I was required to swat up on while working for the Australian Red Cross. This law specified how war should be conducted and how civilians and prisoners of war should be treated. It's signed up to by all 193 countries of the world. Robert's actions were in clear breach of providing protection for prisoners of war. But worse, they are a sad indictment of one person's treatment of another. Such a lack of basic humanity. And what a sad end of a career for the Principal Dr. Stokoe, who was never able to clear his name after he was sacked from the Navy. The Bonaparte family, however, did show their appreciation for his efforts, and acknowledged this had affected his livelihood. Once John Stokoe had returned to England from St Helena, Napoleon Bonaparte's brother Joseph hired John on a number of occasions to escort his young daughters on sea voyages between Europe and America. This would have significantly helped John out financially. So who was the woman Robert smuggled onto St Helena that triggered such a calamitous chain of events? None of the recorded history of the incident named the woman. However, according to rumours, which were said to be always plentiful on St Helena, the lady did not restrict her favours to those of the rank of admiral. We cannot know if these rumours were simply spiteful or accurate. There are no records of any registered wife during Robert's 45 years in the Navy. He left the Navy as a bachelor. When Robert returned to England in 1820, having been in the Navy since he was 13 years old, he took up residence at his country estate near Wanstead, 8 miles north of Charing Cross. Interestingly, he did not move into Chadacre Hall in Suffolk, even though the property had been passed to him upon the death of his father and eldest brother in 1805. The next year Robert married 39-year-old Fanny Mitchell when he was 59. They married in Southwark, Surrey, at St George the Martyr Church. What is odd is Fanny appears to have been a surprisingly ordinary woman, given Robert's family and career status. She was born in Argada, Cork, Ireland. Her father presents as a very ordinary man who was born and died in the same village in Cork. There's no record of her mother, and there are very few records of her life in England until she met Robert. Had Robert met Fanny previously on leave from the Navy? Did they strike up a loving and enduring relationship? Was Fanny the reason for the unhappiness in the Plampin family that James Oakes, the diarist, alluded to? Was she considered an embarrassment to the family and kept as a mistress discreetly out of sight? Was she the woman Robert took to St Helena? Sadly, we cannot be sure. At 63 years old, Robert was recalled to the Navy. His role was to command the Irish squadron of the Navy based at Cork, which coincidentally was where Fanny was born. This portrait of Robert was painted at that time. You'll find it today hanging in the National Gallery of Ireland. Robert finally fully retired in 1828, but never lost the sailor's wanderlust. He continued to travel to Europe in retirement. It was on one of these trips that he died, on Valentine's Day in 1834, in Florence. His body was brought back to England. It appears he had chosen to cut all ties with Chadacre Hall, as was not buried in the family graveyard at Shimpling beside the estate. Instead, he was buried at St Mary the Virgin in Wanstead, near his country estate. Fanny lived a further 30 years after Robert's death. Records show her living at Gothic Cottage, Hammersmith, in the census of 1851, not at the country estate. She appears to be living fairly modestly, with just one cook and one servant. There is a sense of Fanny always being kept separate to Robert's public-facing life, even after marriage. Fanny died childless, with less than 10,000 in her estate, not an unsubstantial amount for the times. Her last address is recorded as 5 Camden Hill, Kensington, beside Holland Park, and within sight of Kensington Palace on a clear day. It would be considered a pretty upmarket address. We can only wonder what path Fanny's life took after Robert's death to lead her to that part of town.